Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth ELT International Conference of 2024. Our second speaker is Ben Dobbs with a very interesting um, title of a presentation, which is Getting Gamification Right, Training Teachers to Gamify. So, hello, Dobb, Mr. Ben.
Thank you very much, Lena. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and good morning. So, thank you very much for attending my session on getting gamification right. Now, I'd like us just to start off by thinking about some objectives. There's 5 key points that I would really like us to achieve in the next 30 to 40 minutes. Well, firstly, I want us to consider what gamification really is. The term is often used and thrown around in a very fashionable way, but it's often difficult for people to pinpoint exactly what gamification is and what it involves. I want us to think about the benefits that gamification has for both teachers and learners. I want us to be able to identify as teachers what opportunities for gamification actually exist, thinking about where they are and how, as teachers, we can really exploit this. I also want us to be able to use a range of different approaches for gamification as well, and to think about how and why gamification can be trained in order to allow teachers to gamify effectively. So the key question throughout this session is going to be, of course, how can we train teachers to gamify? And the answer to this, to me, is something that's actually deceptively simple. And training teachers to gamify effectively requires 2 key elements. Firstly, understanding games and the nature of gamification itself. That's the first part. The second part is developing the ability of teachers to identify where the opportunities for gamification are and how we can really exploit these. So let's think, first of all, about what a game is and what are the key features of a game. So if anyone would like to jump in to share any thoughts in the chat box, please do. So, any ideas what a game is? So, I'm sure there's many people in the group who like board games, card games, anything gaming online. But what exactly is a game? Go on, anyone, feel free. Good. There we are. So, Donald, to start us off there. Games involve rules and fun. Fantastic start there. Anyone else got any thoughts about what a game is and the key features? Good rules to acquire something. Nice one. Great. Okay, well, and Michelle has said something to grab attention and interact with others. Wonderful answers we've got there. Well, we could define a game as an activity, of course, something that's played for entertainment or as part of a professional competition. Now, elements of a game may or will include things such as players. It could be one player, could be teams, could be more. There'll be, as a few of you correctly mentioned, rules and systems to the game, regardless of if it's a board game, a card game, a professional sport, an online game. A game may have some form of structure. It may have a story to it. It may have levels or stages, all of which are part of the game design. There may be some type of rewards involved, whether it's points, prizes, trophy. Games may involve competition, collaboration. They may have the intention to engage people, to involve people, to entertain them. there will be some form of outcome to a game as well, whether it's a score, a winner, or something else. A game will involve elements of challenge, and it may exist within its own reality, space, or universe. So they're thinking about particularly online games, what we could call, we'll talk later about the idea of sandbox games like Minecraft, etc. Okay, now what is gamification? We've thought about what a game is. So what is gamification? And again, I'd like to throw this out to you. As we've mentioned, it's one of these words that gets thrown around a lot. But how would anybody define it? Does anybody have any thoughts about it? Any experiences, any preconceived notions or ideas? Again, put something in the chat box if you'd like to share any thoughts. Good. Lovely one there for us. Incorporating gaming elements. Brilliant. Lovely start there. And I'd take that a little bit further. It's incorporating game elements definitely into non-game context. And as Rasha correctly says there, one example of a non-game context is the educational setting. Wonderful. And Taisha, you've said transforming academic components into games. Fantastic. Good. Okay. Oh, nice one. Good. And I would agree, it can be, definitely, if it's done incorrectly and if it's something that's used as a catch-all. Gamification, you're quite right, has scope, it has limitations, and it's not something that can be done all the time. And alongside other fashionable terms or terms that can be used, like coaching. Again, another term, another approach that I'm a great believer in, but has a certain scope and has limitations to it. Good. So, simply, as we've said, applying gameplay, game elements, game principles in non-game contexts, including education. Of course, education, corporate training, learning. Good. Marketing. Gamification is often used in marketing. We see social media adverts. We are invited to engage with this company and its advertising by playing some form of game. Practice use of investment platforms is another one. So you want to learn how to trade currencies, for example, and certain platforms will have gamified practice approaches to this where you can effectively gamble or invest with tokens there. Onboarding new staff. So there's a chance through simulators to onboard new staff through gamified approaches. Team building and leadership training, of course, is one of the obvious corporate contexts of this, and we'll be speaking a little bit more about this when we speak about the myths of gamification shortly. Gamification in an educational context will have a very definite focus to it. It'll be something that you want to achieve. However, there will also be very welcome side effects, other competencies that we can practice and develop, such as communication, leadership, team building, problem solving, conflict handling, feedback provision, and so on. Now, gamification may also be used in group interviews, selection tests, and also assessment centers. So having teams work on some form of gamified problem or task, there'll be an assessor observing how this is performed, who performs well, what competencies are being displayed, if this is what the organization is looking for, and so on. Now, any game or gamified task used in any educational or training and development setting must always follow two guiding principles. Yes, there must be fun, enjoyment, entertainment, whatever you want to call it. However, that is not enough. If we are playing games in an educational or corporate training setting, and the intention is only fun and entertainment, that's not gamification. There must be fun, but there must also be utility. And by utility, I mean there must be learning from the game or from something within the game as well. If both of those criteria are, or one of the criteria is not met, it's not gamification. If both are met, then it is gamification by definition, at least to me. Now, let's confront some of the myths around gamification. And there's quite a bit of, let's say, naivety around what gamification is. And this is not helped by the fact that this term is thrown around and to a certain extent overused, particularly in corporate settings. So, the first myth is that gamification will always require the use of technology. And this could be something that's to be highly complex and highly involved. It could be use of an app, platform like Kahoot. But no, as teachers, we can easily gamify with no technology at all. Myth two is gamification is only used for team building. And again, no, this is something that is a key focus of gamification. Yes, gamification is often used to build teams, to develop collaboration, etc. But no, it doesn't only have to be used for team building. And this is often a mistake or misunderstanding that people in HR, training and development have. So you'll notice that people think, well, we'll go take it in the Saudi context. We'll go and let's go over to Alula. We'll go and have a lovely away day or a retreat. Again, something that's very fashionable. We'll play some games and fantastic. We'll have broken down the silo mentality in our organization and we'll have built teams. Okay, great. Team building, one focus for gamification, but not the only use that it has. Myth three, gamification is about fun only with no learning purpose. No, it must be fun and it must have some form of learning purpose to it. Oh, great. And Feroz has said, fantastic question. I wonder if a teacher using gamification should have a dynamic personality on top of all of those. You think? I would say they must, a teacher or trainer using gamification must be able to facilitate the game and ensure engagement with it. So I'd say if you can stress the value of the game and you can engage people with it and motivate them and get them focused on you, I'd say that's the important thing. I'd say you also, in some cases, depending on the sector and the personalities of people that you are working with in the group, you need the ability to show people the value of it. So I wouldn't say the dynamic extrovert personality is necessarily something needed in general or purely for gamification. I would say the ability to engage participants, students, trainees, whatever we want to call them, with the task, that's something that's always important. Let's be right about this. But more so for a task where perhaps it's something that is something that's going to involve a bit more movement and perhaps is not everyone's cup of tea. Yes, and great point there. Some teachers find it hard to sell games. Yes, if it's not got a clear learning purpose to it, and if you hesitate about this and you don't believe in it yourself, you're going to ask for trouble with this. Selling a simulation or a case study is always easier with some participants, some students, than selling a game. And oh yes, Dr. Aisha, you've said how can gamification be used in interviews? And often used in group interviews as well. So if someone is, let's say, an organization is looking for staff or potential staff to display certain qualities, certain traits, communication, leadership, conflict handling, problem solving, teamwork, then get the people together, get them working on a gamified task, and we'll look at some common gamified tasks that can be used in different settings shortly. Then you can set people as a group interview, set them a gamified task, and then observe for who displays the competencies that you are looking for. Good. So, our fourth myth, that gamification is just simulations and role plays. No, some simulations, some role plays will be gamified, but then there will be other tasks, as I say, that we will look at soon beyond those. Myth 5 is that gamification is only laughing, joking, or silly tasks. No, while it should be fun and it should be entertaining, and while there will definitely, we hope, be some laughter, some joking, even some silliness during the task, because people are enjoying themselves, it can't just be that. Okay, myth 6, that gamification can only be used in corporate context. No. And again, it's something that's quite fashionable, that training and development managers, talent development managers, HR managers will often request on intensive corporate training courses. But no, we can use it outside the corporate context, of course. Good. Okay. And of course, and Feroz has raised a great point there, that it must be culturally appropriate. Good. So it can't be one of the parameters with gamification, of course, is it must be culturally appropriate and it needs to be safe. So I'm not a big fan of these things like having people falling backwards off tables. I always like gamification to be something that is office based, that can be done around a table or using a bit of space where people feel confident, they feel safe. There's nothing that's going to embarrass people. And this is not just for a Chinese context, not just for a Saudi context. If people feel safe, involved, they don't feel embarrassed, there's no overt physical contact, well, that's good anywhere. Great. Okay, and I've said that myth 7, gamification requires professional tools, i.e., expensive tools or accreditations. Now, this one is where the naivety around gamification comes in. And if any people, if you ever attend any conferences, have a look around the exhibition space, if any of our Saudi colleagues back in, Saudi-based colleagues back in December, if you attended the ATD conference, if you remember that over at the Crown Plaza in Riyadh, and you notice around an event like this, there were a lot of stands displaying equipment for gamification, all these big winches, pulleys, giant blocks, etc. And who was interested in this? It was always company managers, directors, people who've never set foot in a classroom or training room in their life. Teachers, trainers, we know better than that. Teachers, trainers walking past anything like this, because we know that to make engaging, involved, entertaining lessons using gamification or not, we don't need that type of equipment. We can always do better. Okay, so let's think about when we might use gamification. So, as a trainer, teacher, we can use games to disguise learning. So imagine that we have got a group who's not particularly academic, who maybe don't want to be there, they don't want to be seen to be studying. Then we can use some games to disguise the learning. For anybody who works with teenagers or anyone who is going to be a bit surly, a bit critical, use some games, get them involved, hide the learning in that. We can use games as something to be learnt from directly, as we'll talk about. We can, again, of course, use these as engaging motivational tasks. We can use games at strategic points to engage or re-energize a group after people come back from a heavy lunch. If you've got some particularly dry, dull, prescribed content that you've got to deliver, and if you dive straight into it, you know you'll lose the interest of the group, do a game at the start. It doesn't have to be related to the learning context, the learning content, but in terms of getting people engaged and involved, there's the purpose to it. We can use games to build relationships. build teams, and as a group dynamic task at the start of the course. Use it as a form of needs analysis, very similar to what was mentioned before, use in interviews. We can also, not getting into the controversies of multiple intelligences, learning styles, representation systems, but gamification should be another tool in our arsenal that can appeal to learner differences and different learner preferences as well. So getting people moving around. Some people want to be looking at text, looking at case studies, etc. Some people want to be speaking, some want to be up and moving around. And if you want to do that, then gamification can appeal to that type of very kinesthetic learner as well. So before we look at some examples of teaching and training games, let's think about the stages of gamification that as teachers, as trainers, we should always be following. So remember also one other caveat, when the game itself is going on, we should be monitoring. However, we should be doing this without interfering. And personally, that's something that I find very difficult. I always want to be involved, encouraging people, giving a lot of affirmative feedback, but this is a mistake. We want to be observing, going around, very fluid motion, watching what's going on, and perhaps taking notes or recording in our minds where we will be giving feedback after the task. So the stages of gamification are these. Firstly, if you are going to be using any gamified task with your class or your training group, firstly, give them a briefing. Explain what they are going to be doing, explain what the task is, how it will work, explain the benefits of it. And there comes in the idea of really selling the game to people. Then they'll actually play the game itself. They'll engage in the task. After this, it can't just be the game itself and we stop. There should always be some form of discussion and reflection after. So after the game has been completed, I would really encourage you to pose some form of reflective question and anything to get people to think, get the students, the participants really thinking about their own performance with that. What went well, what didn't go so well, what competencies they displayed, how well was the language used, how well did they solve problems, and so on. So that is very much focused on the participants, the students themselves. Then comes our turn. We then give our feedback. And this could be on language, communication. It could be something like leadership, teamwork, if you're working in the corporate context. And then action planning. And by action planning, I'm talking about the learning experiences and how we can apply this elsewhere. For example, for me in the corporate context, how are we going to apply the problem solving, the teamwork that we just practiced? How are we going to take that away and take that back to our offices and use those newly developed competencies in real life? It could be, what will we do next time? Whatever it is, make sure there's some type of meaningful application beyond just the game. So we can really see from this, we are not just entertaining people. We're not just passing the time. So let's think about identifying opportunities. And this is what I would really encourage any teacher who is interested in gamification to do. And as we'll see, we don't need technology. We don't need specialized equipment. So first, the opportunity, task type. And sometimes gamification will occur normally or unconsciously with task types that we will automatically do like a team quiz. So there we are using gamification and we're not even perhaps using the term gamification. It's something that's in our normal repertoire as teachers. Another opportunity is task location. Gamification can occur through moving tasks from the classroom. Now, again, I'm not going to be prescriptive with this. I just want you to think about if there's an opportunity there. So instead of having, let's say, flashcards and saying, what is this? Let's get people moving around the building, taking pictures of different items, for example, find things themselves. Task nature is another opportunity. Gamification through making a seemingly ordinary classroom task more competitive. So, can we set a time limit? Can we set a first to finish approach, adding in that element of competition, even to something as mundane as or as normal as a worksheet? And there we are. We've gamified it by making it competitive. Task design is another one. We can gamify specific tasks, special games, such as tasks building balloons, bridge building, all of this type of thing. So there we've got gamification through task design. We mentioned before about the personality of the teacher, of the trainer. Now, sometimes you may find that you have accidentally gamified a task because the task that you've set is naturally humorous and enjoyable as part of the culture of the classroom. If you've got the right culture there and people are engaged, people are involved, relaxed, etc., I'm not talking about people joking all the time. Jokes are cultural events, but humor is the culture that you create within the group. So there might be accidental gamification, maybe task adjustment. So here I'm talking about we cut up a list and we have people moving around, putting things in order, sticking things on a board or on a wall, rather than having something worksheet based. So there's something that's a bit more gamified. Also, task physicality. So is there something that we can conduct as a race? Something rather than having things again on a worksheet, can we have something done and having people moving around from one end of the room to the other? Again, make sure it's culturally appropriate. Make sure that the reasons behind it have been sold to the group. Task device as well. So we can, again, as we mentioned before, doesn't have to be technology based, but we can gamify through use of different devices and apps. Of course, things like Kahoot being the favorite. Okay, so some questions that I would really encourage you to ask as teachers if you are interested in gamifying are these. Firstly, ask yourself, is the task naturally gamified? The answer might be yes, in which case, brilliant, you're applying gamification. Other points, then some other questions. Can I gamify this task by moving the location if you decide that's something you want to do? Is there any way to add competition to the task to make it something that's more fun as well as having use to it? Other question, is there a special, specific task that I as a teacher can design to develop the targeted competence, the targeted language, the targeted skill, function, whatever it is, to target and develop that in a more useful, fun way? So if you are developing, let's say, presentation skills, is there something you can do to make that more fun, to make that more competitive, to make that more involved or humorous? Next question, what, if anything, can be done to create a culture of humor in this task? Remember, I'm not saying joking or silliness. I'm talking about something being motivational, relaxed, and involved. Next question, can I adjust or modify this task to make it more fun in some way without losing the essential learning purpose? And again, only us as the teachers can decide on this based on the task, based on our students, based on the context in which we are working. Next thing, could some element of movement be added in order to make this more of a game? It's because typically the tasks we're doing maybe are more seated, more static. Is there something we can do just to appeal to that more kinesthetic approach to get people moving around? Remember, as we said, keep it appropriate, keep it safe, avoid any physical contact, danger, embarrassment. Is there anything, if we are into our technology, any websites, apps, tools, technology that could make these tasks more fun, more useful? If you're into your uh, virtual reality, your augmented reality, your AI, online games, is there something we can do there? Now, before we do this and before we look at some examples, there are some pros and cons to this. And I'm aware of the time, so I'll just go through some of these with us. But would anybody in the chat like to share any positives and negatives of this?
While we're waiting, so I don't interrupt, just a reminder, we have 5 minutes left.
Perfect. Thank you, Selena. Great. Any pros and cons then, anyone? Oh, yes, and Feroz has said that gamification became widely recognized. Good. Yes, indeed. So gamification is one of those terms where it's been used for a good few years, then our understanding of it has changed, has evolved, has morphed over time. Good. Yes, indeed. So cons, superficial engagement. Raja, yes, you said fosters engagement, demotivated learners. Good. Good. So, okay, I'll present some of my thoughts. Well, here we are. The pros that I'm saying, hopefully, if done well, it could take longer. So that's why, as well, I'm saying with the caveat, gamification has scope to it, as does role playing, simulations, case studies, and it's no different to any other task type or methodology we'd use. Good. Point systems, good. Yeah, indeed. Good. Oh, yes. Now, Donald, with the model I've said about before with the opportunities, it often uses, but it doesn't have to. So if you think that that's unhelpful, no, you don't have to add in those elements. No. And the usefulness there, I would agree with you. I'd say is dubious. Our concern is not people winning games. Our concern is learning. So pros, I'm saying motivation, energizing, multiple focuses. It can surface, it can bring out hidden competencies such as leadership. It can appeal to learner differences. It can be great at strategic points. We can, to a certain extent, use this at any level as well. It's communicative. It may be good marketing for your training if people are very much in work in the Saudi context, very much into Snapchat. So use on social media. It can increase student talking time, reduce stress, often creative. The cons, well, preparation, equipment needed, perhaps. And by that, I'm not talking about this big, expensive equipment. I'm talking about the need to purchase things like balloon string, if that's the type of game you are aiming for. The purpose may not be obvious to some people. It does require some budget and resources in some cases, however small that might be. It may be expensive if specialized equipment is needed, like virtual reality headsets. We need to consider cultural appropriacy, something that's come up again and again. It must not be overdone. Don't gamify every single thing. It's difficult to do virtually. So if you're teaching over Zoom or other platforms, gamification can be difficult unless it's technology mediated. Is it a fashion? Is it a temporary fad? And the novelty of some forms of this can wear off, so don't overuse it. Now, just to finish off with, I'm just giving you a little list here of some common training games. So some very generic training games are things like the balloon tower, spaghetti tower, and be careful with anything involving food as well. And bridge building, pipe cleaner tower. So if you're working in the Saudi context, go to Jaria Bookstore. Great source of equipment for gamification. Have a look at the craft parts there. You really get creative with this. Vocabulary development and low tech. Well, scavenger hunt, hangman, dictation, board races, Pictionary, back to the board games, charades, guess who I am, 20 questions, Simon Says, and what I'm calling the pub quiz, where you have different tables and you ask questions and they've got to write down the answers, maybe a little prize at the end. Projects. Here we are, design a board game. board games themselves, Scrabble, Upword, Boggle, Monopoly, Taboo. For business functions, you can gamify emailing, such as having the email snowball game where you write an email, scrunch it up, throw it across the room. Presentation karaoke. If you were looking for accreditations as well, Lego Serious Play. There's another one, and we can gamify using some reasonable Lego sets as well. Technology mediated, Kahoot, Socrative, Wordwall, Quizlet, Bamboozle, Bluecut, Scarify, and so on. Intercultural, Banga, the card game, the silent card game where each table has a different set of rules and people move around. Good. And again, there's Banga is a good example of something without competition. Okay, good. And video games, if you're into things there, Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite, SimCity, Tycoon series. So these type of sandbox games we can often use as teachers. I'll be honest, not something that I'm into. So no questions about Minecraft or Roblox or Fortnite for me. And if you're looking to do off-site visits, well, escape rooms as well. There's another one. So conclusions, well, we've really answered this to a certain extent already. What can we conclude? How can we apply these ideas? So just if anyone would like to share any of their thoughts about how you could apply gamification, I'd love to know that. Yes, yeah. Now there's another great point for us. So you're on fire with this, with your ideas with this. Great reflections. And I would tend to say with this, I'd take into account for working in a corporate context. I'll just draw on that. For me, I would take into account differences in sectors. So, for example, working in a military context, gamification less so, but working in an educational context, then yes, I'd say that the sector is one factor. I would also say personalities as well. So that would be my choice over thinking about generational differences. I've had young people in groups throw themselves into games, some people who've been more skeptical. Then I've had people who I thought would never get involved with gamified tasks, really, really getting involved with it and loving it and engaging really well with it, who have been much older. So I'd say its personality is the overarching factor for me. Good. Using it in terms of formative assessments. Yeah, there we are, Asha. Fantastic example. And you're using it, you've got the knowledge of these different technology tools that you're using really well. Good. Yeah, now there we are. Yeah, there we are, Donald. So you can see with that's an example of what I mean with personalities. I would always be, if we looked at the stereotypes of that sector, we'd think, oh no, they won't do. But then you then present the game and justify it in its learning purpose, and people dive into it. So it's personality over generational sector. Yes. Okay, so here I've put some recommended reading there. I'd really recommend Carl Kapp's book there and following him on YouTube as well. He puts out some great platforms. Good. I'm afraid some gamification approaches aren't inclusive for neurodivergent learners. Great point. Exactly. And as I've said, gamification has a scope. And if you found that with your context that it's not appropriate for working with those points, with those learners, wonderful point. I'm not saying that this is a catch-all. The same as none of the tools or tasks that we use are a catch-all or some type of great paradigm of learning or perfect example. Use gamification as one of the many tools in your repertoire as a teacher. Good. Okay, so with any questions, yes, we've had an approach there. I'm aware of the time. So please, if you need to get in touch, here's my contact details. Connect with me and follow our company. I'm here with fellow distancer director and learning mentor Michelle Hunter. If you want to follow our company on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, can't get you there, sorry, X, formerly, of course, formerly Twitter, please do. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for all of your points.
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to have you today at our conference. We appreciate your input here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. See you.
That's great.